What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. So before I get into this video, I want to give a shout out to a particular YouTuber. I don't want to say your name, you know what I'm saying, but I just want to express that you're a solid dude, you know what I'm saying. We had made a bet, me and this particular YouTuber, before the season started, uh, on a particular team, whether or not they were going to make the playoffs. I said that they weren't. He said that they would. Ultimately, they didn't, and he honored that bet, and that shows that he's a real man. You know what I'm saying? He stood up and accepted his responsibility as I would have had I lost the bet. You know what I'm saying? But he's vowed that his team will come back next year and make the playoffs. All right. So shout out to that individual, and shout out to legendary Tony for his donation to the channel as well. All right. So, and I saw your video request. Um, I can have that done a couple days, you know what I'm saying, because I'm familiar with that person that you asked me to do the biography about. So I want to shout out those individuals for um, showing love to the channel and also showing that they are an honorable person, that they honored the bet. Now let me transition to this person right here in this image, this guy who is slam dunking over this hapless opponent. Is none other than Skywalker David Thompson. All right. Now, remember back in September, I think it was 2009, when Michael Jordan was elected to the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame. The person that represented him was David Thompson. A lot of younger people didn't quite know who he was. Well, David Thompson, in the I'd say the early 19, maybe late 60s, but definitely early. Well, I'd say more the early to mid 1970s. He was definitely a legend in North Carolina. In my opinion, he's the greatest player ever to come out of North Carolina State. If you watch David Thompson's, uh, if you watch highlights of David Thompson, you watch his games, you'll definitely see a lot of Michael Jordan's game in him. Like you'll see a lot of his tendencies. A lot of Michael Jordan's game was patterned off of David Thompson. I would say other players that influenced Michael Jordan a little bit, Dr. J, but the other one that you could also see a lot of influence on, for as far as Jordan is concerned, is Walter Davis. Now, David Thompson, if it was not for injuries, but more importantly, drug addiction, which he only uh, conquered when he became a born again Christian. If it weren't for these things, David Thompson would be a bigger name in basketball, especially when it pertains to the NBA. I think he could have been nearly as great as Michael Jordan, potential wise, had it not been for drugs and injuries. He's one of the greatest ABA players in just one year, 75, 76, I think it was in the ABA. But just that particular year, he tore up the ABA. And then afterward, for the duration of the late 70s, very early 80s, he was a perennial all star. And he could do it all, man. I mean, he had a tremendous vertical leap, 44, 45 inches vertical leap. And remember, he was only he's listed as 6'4", but he's probably more around 6'3". So this is a guy that's a little bit shorter than Dwayne Wade, but more athletic as far as vertical leap. I think Wade had like a 38-inch vertical leap. This guy had a 44, 45-inch vertical leap. Some say 46-inch vertical leap. And he could, allegedly and supposedly, he was able to, take with his vertical leap and his, when you combine his vertical leap with his wingspan and his large hands, he was able to take a penny or a coin off the top of the backboard. You have to be you either have to be extraordinarily tall or possess extraordinarily gifted jumping ability to be able to do something like that. And David Thompson was known for his leaping ability. He participated in the first slam dunk contest, which was held in the ABA in 1976, their last year of existence. I believe he was the runner-up to Julius Erving uh, in that contest. But he also had other elements to his game. He was, for his era, a great outside shooter. Now remember, there was a three-point line in the ABA, but when he played in the 1970s in the NBA, there was no three-point line. So what was considered a great outside shooter then was a guy that had mid-range ability outside to about 21, 22 feet. And David Thompson had great range outside to 20, 21, 22 feet. So he had a jump shot, but he also was possessed with tremendous leaping ability and athleticism. This is a guy that can drive the basket and, you know what I'm saying, either he could score or some sensational play. You know what I'm saying, he could, literally leap over people and make a phenomenal play as far as like trying to score the basketball. This is a guy that was because of his leaping ability, it made him a better than average rebounder for a guy of his size. And, also because of his leaping ability, it allowed him to be able to get shots off versus taller defenders that other guys his size weren't able to do. And also with his large hands, he was able to do things with the basketball that players with smaller hands aren't able to do. The guys like Dr. J, the guys like Clyde Drexler, the guys like Michael Jordan, the guys like Connie Hawkins are able to do certain things with the basketball that unfortunately some other guys couldn't do. Like this, one of the things that's the only weakness I saw in Kobe is he couldn't do certain things with the basketball toward the rim that other guys could do because his hands were a little bit smaller than the other guys. That's one of the things I think that Phil said. That's one of the main things that separated Jordan from Kobe was the hand size and being able to do certain things with basketball as far as finishing toward the rim. But this guy was a phenomenal scorer. He came very close to winning the 1977-78 NBA scoring title in a race between him and George Gervin, also a former ABA player with the San Antonio Spurs, which was also a team that was formerly in the ABA. One of the four teams that switched over from the ABA to the NBA after the 76 merger. The other team, two teams being the then New York Nets, then becoming the New Jersey Nets, and of course now the Brooklyn Nets, and the other team being the Indiana Pacers. Uh, of these teams, the only team to win a championship so far in the NBA is San Antonio Spurs. Though some people think that the Nets might end that streak this year. But that scoring year was, I believe, David Thompson's best in the NBA. Coming into that night, I think David Thompson and George Gervin were both averaging around 27.1 points per game, I think, somewhere in that range. And going into that day, David Thompson unleashed nuclear Armageddon against the Detroit Pistons. Okay, uh, he wasn't a guy that normally shot the basketball a lot, even though he was a great scorer. By that I mean, in none of his seasons did he ever exceed 20 shot attempts per game. Whereas some guys like Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, in certain seasons, Kobe in certain seasons, James Harden in a lot of seasons, Allen Iverson, Rick Barry, Elgin Baylor, to an extent Jerry West, and others, they are aggressive scorers. These are the guys that had no problem shooting the ball 25, 30 plus times a night. Because he was surrounded by other guys that could score, just not as well as he could, He didn't shoot the ball 50 times a night, but this particular day, he got the green light to shoot, and he scored 53 points at halftime. All right, he wound up with 73 points against the Detroit Pistons. From what I understand, they really did a great job of doubling him and sometimes tripling him in the second half of that game. David Thompson said, and despite the defense, he was still able to score another 20 points in the second half and wound up with 73. And he's one of only 6 players to score at least 70 points in a game, joining Devin Booker, Elgin Baylor, Wilt Chamberlain, David Robinson, and and Kobe Bryant. Uh, and it looked like he had a scoring title. One, George Gervin would need 58 points to win the title, and I can't remember who they played. The I can't remember who they played. The Spurs. I want to say they played the New Orleans Jazz in the last game, and Gervin went out and scored 63 points. Now they did a really good job of containing Gervin in the second half because Gervin really was going for the scoring title, and they got him out of rhythm. And even though at one point he was hot, he missed a lot of shots down the stretch, and he wound up only shooting. I remember this in my head. He shot 23 or 49 from the floor in that particular game. So they really did a good job of getting him out of rhythm, but he still wound up with 63 points and the scoring title. But despite David Thompson's scoring prowess, he was an all-around guy. He was known as a really good defensive player. I don't want to say he was Gary Payton, but he was a really good defensive player, and he was just a terror for a guy that was so small. And I want to look at some of his accolades. Um, so he was picked. He was the first overall pick in the 1975 NBA draft, but he opted to play in the ABA. And he played from 1975 to 1984. He primarily played the shooting guard position. From 1975 to 1982, he played for the Denver Nuggets. And then from 82 to 84, he played for the then Seattle Supersonics, who have been rebranded to Oklahoma City Thunder. If the Seattle Supersonics come back into existence, what would happen is the Thunder would become their own individual franchise, and all retroactive history with the Supersonics would go back to the Supersonics. So he was a 4-time NBA All-Star. He was an ABA All Star. So altogether, he's a 5-time NBA, 5-time All Star. He was the NBA All Star Game MVP in 1979, 2-time All NBA First Team, ABA All Star. Well, I already said that. He was the ABA All Star Game MVP in 1976, All ABA Second Team in 1976, ABA Rookie of the Year in 1976, ABA All Rookie First Team in 1976. He's on the ABA All-Time Team despite only playing 1 year in the ABA. 1 year, 75, 76. His number 33 is retired by the Denver Nuggets. Um, he won the NCAA Championship in 1974, the NCAA Final Four Most Outstanding Player in 1974, the National College Player of the Year in 1975, 3-time consensus First Team All American 3 years in a row, 3-time ACC Player of the Year 3 years in a row, 3-time First Team All ACC 3 years in a row, and his number 44 is retired by the North Carolina Wolfpack. Now, when you combine his ABA and NBA career, he scored 13,422 points, or 22.7 point per game average, 2,446 rebounds, or 4.1 rebound per game average, and dished 1,939 assists for 3.3 assists per game average. Um, Michael Jordan said of David Thompson, the whole meaning of vertical leap began with David Thompson. Bill Walton describes David Thompson as being Jordan, Kobe Bryant, Tracy McGrady, and LeBron James rolled into one. Thompson attended Crest Senior High School and he played for the school's varsity basketball team for 4 years. And then afterwards, he joined uh, the University of North Carolina State, and he led them to an undefeated season in 73, 27-0, but the Wolfpack was banned from postseason play that year due to NCAA rule violations involving the recruiting of Thompson. He then led the Wolfpack to a 30-1 season and the NCAA Men's Division I basketball championship in 1974. In the semifinal game, NCSU defeated the reigning national champions UCLA in double overtime. In the championship game, they won easily over Marquette, 76-64. His nickname was Skywalker because of his incredible vertical leap. The alley-oop pass, now a staple of today's high-flying above-the-rim game, was invented by Thompson and his North Carolina State teammate Monte Towe, and first used as an integral part of the offense by North Carolina State coach Norm Sloan to take advantage of Thompson's leaping ability. Thompson is considered one of the greatest players in the history of the ACC, or the Atlantic Coast Conference. Among such talents is Michael Jordan, Ralph Sampson, Tim Duncan, Christian Laettner, and Len Bias. Thompson played basketball while the slam dunk was outlawed from 67 to 77 by the Lou Alcindor rule, or as I call the tall athletic nigger rule. In 1975, playing his final home game at North Carolina State against UNC Charlotte, late in the second half, Thompson on a breakaway received a long pass from a teammate, resulting in the first and only dunk of his collegiate career, a goal that was promptly disallowed by a technical foul. Thompson's number 44 remains the lone number retired by the school in men's basketball. Well, that's why I said he's the greatest player in North Carolina State history. Later on, however, um, after he suffered a foot injury during the 80, I think the 79-80 season, he began to develop a substance abuse problem. Um, it progressively got worse, and the effects of the foot problem and injuries and drug addiction began to affect his overall play. And drug problem first became public after his erratic debut season in Seattle, after which he checked into a Denver rehabilitation facility in '83. His career-ending 1984 knee injury resulted from him being shoved down a stairwell during a fight at Studio 54, and later factored into his failed 1985 tryout with the Indiana Pacers, after which he was arrested that night for public intoxication. By 1986, Thompson was reportedly spending $1,000 a day on his cocaine habit, for which he checked into rehab that year in Kirkland, Washington. After he was sentenced to 180 days of jail in 1987 for assaulting his wife, Thompson became a committed Christian and reorganized his life. Later on, Thompson worked with the Charlotte Hornets Community Relations Department in 1990, and when he was 37 years old, played in the Legends Classic game during the 1992 NBA All-Star Weekend, but he was one of two players, he and Norm Nixon, who were stretchered out of the game with serious leg injuries. This helped to play a factor in the league retiring the Legends game after the next year. Thompson returned to North Carolina State in 2003 to complete his degree in sociology. The next year, he shot an autobiographical film, autobiographical. What the fuck is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Autobiographical. He shot a film that was an autobiography titled Skywalker. Autobiographical. Sometimes, boy, some of these words, man. He was inducted into the Basketball Hall of Fame on May 6, 1996, and he introduced Michael Jordan, as I said earlier, in the latter's 2009 induction. He currently works as a motivational speaker and participates in events with the Hornets and Denver Nuggets. For his career, he was a very accurate scorer from the floor, shooting a little over 50% from the field. For his era, he was not a bad three-point shooter, not tremendous, but I think he shot somewhere in the upper 20s as far as, see if I can find it. I'm trying to find that link, but can't find it right now. But he shot about 51% from the floor for his career, um, which is very high considering that he was only 6'3", shooting guard. Um, I think he shot something around 26 or 27% from three, which wasn't bad considering the era that he played in. And he was a good foul shooter. Um, Only player in NBA history named MVP of both the ABA and NBA All Star games. And during that 73-point game, he scored what was then an NBA record, 32 points in the second quarter. But that record only stood for a couple of hours because George Gervin would score 33 points against the New Orleans Jazz, of course it was the Jazz, on the same day when he scored 63 points. That record would later be tied by Carmelo Anthony and then broken by Klay Thompson. I think it was back in maybe 2015 when he scored 37 points in the third quarter. I think it might have been against the Sacramento Kings. But that's pretty much what I wanted to say, man. This is one of the unsung players in NBA history. Uh, had he not suffered from injuries, had he had a longer career, this is a guy that definitely, if he'd been blessed with say the longevity of LeBron James or at least Kobe or Paul Pierce or something like that, this is a guy that definitely would have cracked 20,000 career points, maybe even more than that, 25,000. Uh, Definitely would have averaged, something like 24 points a game. He was not a selfish player. He went to college. He wasn't a selfish guy. He would have been I think, a valuable piece as he got older to a championship team. We're looking at him totally different, uh, even more so than how we look at him today. But that's pretty much what I want to say about Skywalker, David Thompson.